Act to July 1, 2030.
Thank you for the briefing. Is there any discussion? And I'll get the ones that are just coming in. Let them settle in. We'll get this. Would you, since for the new ones, would you go back through your?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. To repeat, Senate Bill 197 would extend the current sunset date of the Star Bonds Financing Act to July 1, 2030.
July 1, 2030 was the extension to that. Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Yes, Senator Clem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this where we would put in an amendment at this point in time?
Do you have an amendment?
Yes, sir, I do.
Would you like to read your amendment?
Yes, I would. Could we pass, do we have it to pass out? Can you describe to me what the amendment is? Yes, ma'am, yes. It is the amendment that seeks to authorize the redevelopment of certain dilapidated mall facilities. And I'll explain that really quick. The amendment seeks to authorize the redevelopment of certain dilapidated mall facilities throughout Kansas as eligible projects under the Star Bonds Initiative. The redevelopment of these facilities will promote economic revitalization while remaining aligned with the original intent of the Star Bond program. In these areas of disrepair, there is a need to spur a cycle of economic advancement. Many malls have been closed for years, some leveled, and many continue to decline. This amendment is a creative use that fits the spirit of the Star Bond program. By leveraging Star Bond incentives, the redevelopment of these properties can transform them into mixed-use spaces, entertainment hubs, or other community-centric developments that drive tourism and economic growth. To talk about quickly the provisions of the amendment that are important, 50% of the total leasable area of a mall or a dilapidated space would be area for businesses to operate is unoccupied. So at least 50% of a mall would have to be unoccupied. A minimum combined capital investment of at least $10 million is required for any eligible project under this provision. And redevelopment projects must demonstrate a substantial contribution to regional economic growth, tourism, and job creation, consistent with the goals of the Star Bond Initiative today.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm intrigued by this idea, Senator Klemp. My question would be, is it fair to just limit this to malls and not other large abandoned spaces if we're now moving into renovation and not just new construction of areas?
I think that's a fair question. Yes, yeah.
Fair enough.
Thank you. One of the thoughts that I've heard would be possibly vacant schools could possibly, but that's not in this language.
That is not, no, sir. I think all those points are valid. This specific bill was, so we got to thinking there's some spaces in Wichita, there's actually space in Leavenworth County, so it created this moment to talk about malls in general. But it does open itself up to, if you believe in the program and what it can do to revitalize some dilapidated areas, I think it is amendable to expanding.
I think there's some potential here, and maybe now's not the time to, I think, get into the weeds on is it expansive enough. We could maybe talk about that on the floor. So I think I'll support this idea, but just we'll have some discussions later if it gets up next week. But maybe thinking about expanding it a little bit as well would be appropriate. So thank you, Senator Clem.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the senator's comments, and I actually would like to discuss it further in committee. Oftentimes on the floor, to get in the weeds like that, we tend to lose people more than we pick them up. So maybe if you could give us an idea of what you're looking at, that would be great. I do not support the Star Bonds, but I like the idea of using this for existing. We always tend to do only new development, and so maybe this is an avenue that would be beneficial to the state.
Senator Titus.
Yeah, I think I say let's put it off because I don't necessarily, I've not had enough time to think through where some of those parameters would be. And maybe this is a conversation with our colleagues in the House if it gets that far. But, right, I wouldn't have thought of schools, but I know there are structures out there and maybe it's a square footage determination for remodeling or something like, I just don't know where those lines are and I'd hate to do that on the fly and not get it right, so.
My opinion, it's good. It's a good idea to look at those structures that are no longer in use. And we have a good example here in Topeka, a mall that was torn down that could possibly use. Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I like the idea of this, and maybe we do a prototype of this for a year and then come back next year. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments or questions? Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I understand it, this doesn't change anything as it relates to the project still having to be approved by the Department of Commerce to make sure that it fits within the economic development or tourism angle of the original Star Bond intent, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Owens says it's correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Senator, you can move your amendment.
I move the mall amendment for Senate Bill 197.
Do we have a second? Second by Senator Blue. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Is there any other discussion on Senate Bill 197? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment. And while Kyle's passing out the amendment, this is from the testimony that we got from AFP on some of their conversations or some of their ideas that they had. In my amendment, it's not all of them because I don't know the process. I don't know Star Bonds well enough to go into the weeds on some of their amendment ideas, but this one is, I feel like these are pretty non-controversial ones. How to deal with transparency and just the fact of, the can't use eminent domain, those ones. So willing to have Kyle kind of go through it because it looks like a lot, but I think when Kyle explains it, it's not as embracive as it looks. So. And if you have any questions, I encourage you to pull up that testimony where they are coming up with their ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first page has a summary of the changes, and the bullet point language that is taken directly from the testimony that was provided by Americans for Prosperity, along with the locations of where those changes would be made. And so starting on page 1, changes would be made to eliminate the authority for the state and municipality to use eminent domain to build a Star Bond district. Additional changes are made on pages 20 and 21 for that recommendation. Second, all documents used to consider Star Bond approval must be available on the Kansas Department of Commerce website within 30 days of the governing municipality's approval. That change can be found on page 7. Municipalities must notify residents of a Star Bond approval, the amount of increment revenue collected, and sales tax revenue forgone, presented in terms of dollars and estimated municipality tax reduction. That's on the bottom of page 7. And similarly, the Kansas Department of Commerce would be required to display the amount of sales tax forgone to the municipality from a pending and also from approved Star Bond projects on a continuing basis on the department's website. That revenue would be termed sales tax revenue forgone and presented in dollars and estimated municipality sales tax reduction. Additionally, all entities within a Star Bond would be required to report to the Secretary of Commerce visitor zip codes on a quarterly basis. The Secretary would then need to publish that quarterly visitor data within 30 days of the start of the subsequent quarter. The changes would also disallow any state general funds or federal revenues from being used to pay off Star Bonds. And then lastly, Star Bond increment revenue could not be used for any subsequent star bond project. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kyle. Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like I said, I don't know enough about the Star Bond program to go into the weeds on everything that they offered. I think these ones just make sense. I think transparency is extremely important, especially in the Department of Commerce. And that, but I would be willing to have a discussion. And if one of these sticks out more than others, I'm open to having a division of the amendment if one is not one that you guys like, so.
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions, which will probably put Mr. Hamilton on the spot, but the first question is, since this is a substitute bill, does that undo Senator Klem's previously adopted motion?
Thank you, Senator. I did mean to bring that up, to ask the bringer of the amendment if she would be willing to, I guess, conceptually incorporate the previously approved amendment into this substitute bill.
Yes, thank you. I got here a little late, or else I would have offered this first, but absolutely, I don't want to undo the previous amendment.
Very good. Second question then, on the elimination of authority for eminent domain in a Starnbottom district. So the Eminent Domain Procedure Act says that private property shall not be taken by eminent domain except for public use. So in reconciling those two sections, because I know one of the early Starbond projects caused some issues, it would have to be a municipally owned area for a city to currently use eminent domain to take something in a Starbond project, like streets or something. Is that the correct reading of those two? Or is there some other authority in the Starbond Act that would supersede the Eminent Domain Procedure Act?
I would just say in regards to that this particular provision simply prohibits the eminent domain authority that's specifically and expressly given under star bonds to a city or county from being used in furtherance of that district. It wouldn't override the municipalities.
The better way I should have asked that is, what would be the current status then? So going forward, it would be very clear. But how, is that actually a functional eminent domain authority currently? Again, I know that's a difficult question on the fly. But.
Right, and I'm not immediately familiar if, you know, that there's been a ruling or precedent stating that this eminent domain authority in the Star Bonds Act is ineffective. But to the degree that it is, this would prohibit it from being utilized for Star Bonds projects.
Thank you.
Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would propose that we take these one by one. I think we'd be better served by that. I mean, these are somewhat, I mean, obviously they're related in their sense they all deal with star bonds, but they're somewhat different topic areas. I think maybe it'd be better to just take these one by one, and that way folks wouldn't be in the position of voting yay or nay for all or nothing. Folks might like certain ones of these and dislike others. So that would be just my proposal for, obviously, for your consideration, Mr. Chair.
Senator Corson, are you making a motion to divide this?
Sure, I'd make a motion to divide it into separate amendments, to divide the amendment into each bullet to be a separate amendment.
We'll vote on each one.
And vote on each one up or down, yeah. That'd be my motion.
Any discussion on that? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's no discussion on a motion to divide. It's just an up or down vote, so.
Right. So do we have a second on that motion? Second. Motion's been made and seconded to divide the question on these amendments. All in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Motion's been made and seconded and approved to divide the question, so I think that we'll go through these hopefully rather rapidly. So we'll start with the first one. Eliminate the authority for the state and municipality to use eminent domain to build a star bond district, page 1. Any discussion on that? Yes, Senator Tyson.
So I think this is already limited, but I think it would be good to go back and clarify and clean it up. And if I'm wrong about that, I would be happy to work on this later. But I'll be supporting this amendment. But I do think if anyone has heartburn, I think it's already fairly limited. And again, if I figure out that's wrong, I'll be happy to share it with everybody. But I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would layer on to Senator Titus's comments as well. I'm curious as to how many past projects have used eminent domain. That would be interesting to understand that. And does this curb a municipality? It seems like this may curb a municipality from making a decision to eminent domain for this project. And I don't know if we want to limit local government from those things. I would just like clarity as well, but I would be supporting it, but I would like the clarity.
Any other comments? Yes, Senator Dietrich.
No, I just want to agree with what these gentlemen have both said. I mean, I just think there's a lot here we just don't know. And so I would like to know that because we all have, I don't know about all of us, but many of us have star-bond projects in our districts currently, or our communities are looking at that. I just want to make sure, not having to have had the opportunity to have a conversation with municipal governments, if this is going to be something that, you know, we're not, somebody said pulling the trigger just a little too quickly. Just don't have enough information. Thank you.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hate to be the one on procedural, but the person that introduced this did not make a motion, and then there was a motion to divide, but there wasn't a motion before us. So I just want to get us back on track, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's go back and ask advisors. Go ahead, give us a.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Legislative Research Department has a memo from 2014 on eminent domain, and we did report that there was the use of eminent domain in building the racetrack in Wyandotte County, and there was a court case, and it's State XRL Tomasic versus Unified Government of Wyandotte County. The court upheld provisions of the tax increment financing law, which authorized special obligation sales tax revenue bonds, star bonds, and use of eminent domain to build an auto racetrack in Wyandotte County. The court held that the development of the auto racetrack facility and related projects were valid public purposes for which TIF and star bonds could be issued and eminent domain authority could be exercised.
Mr. Chair. Yes. I'd note the eminent domain statute that I read was not adopted until 2006, so that case would predate. I'm assuming this was in response, I believe, I don't have access to Westlaw, but I believe there was a City of Manhattan case for their star bond redevelopment where taking land for economic development purposes came up, if that helps with the search, but.
Senator Tyson, we'll go back to your comment. Would you go ahead and give us your comment again, please?
So, Mr. Chairman, there was not a motion before the committee. It had not been moved or seconded. But the motion was to divide, but we didn't have anything to divide. So I would suggest that we back up and ask him to withdraw the motion to divide and just take these one motion at a time. I think that would make it simpler, and I think that's where the majority of the.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we amend and take each bullet point one amendment at a time.
Do I have a second? Second. Senator Corson, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Now, we'll go back through. We are on number one. We had discussion on item number one. Any further discussion on item number one? Seeing none. Request. Is there any other discussion on one that we need to do at this time? So, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just of the view that I feel like I don't have enough data to really make a good determination of whether or not I would support this amendment. I would move And I think without having benefited from the discussion yet, I think a lot of these are things that we're just going to need more data and more analysis and more research done on to be able to make an educated decision about whether or not we would support these. So the first one is kind of a good example of that. I just don't feel like I have enough data to really make what I think is, a good decision, yay or nay on this. And I think several others are going to put me and maybe other members in that same position. So I guess in the abundance of caution, I'm just going to be a no for now on many of these, or I don't know if we want to postpone this and maybe take this up Monday and maybe give research some time to, maybe we could collect various questions that members have about these amendments and maybe try to work this on Monday. Obviously, your call, Mr. Chair, but I think a lot of these present a lot of questions that we just need more answers to before we can make educated decisions for good policy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other discussion on that comment? I agree. This is the first time that we have seen these that have been presented to the committee. We have 4 other bills that we are going to, that would require us to work on Monday. But I plan to be here Monday. I don't know about the rest of the committee, but I'm planning to be here Monday. So with that, I would like to move on to our second one, and we will delay this until Monday on this bill. We'll move on to our second one, and that is Senate Bill 227. Oh, wait a minute, that was, I think they gave us the wrong one first. 197 was supposed to be our first one, so we're going to go ahead and 197.
No,
Now my list is wrong.
no, the details of 197
Seven.
is wrong.
Right, okay. So 197 is 227 now is the one we're going to do. This is backwards on this one here. Okay, 227. And that is providing for credit percentages for tax credits for historic structures. And could we get a briefing on that?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill number 227 would amend KSA 7932-211 to provide for some different credit percentages for the tax credit for certain expenditures for the restoration and preservation of qualified historic structures based on different city populations and the amount of the expenditures. Essentially, the 25% would remain, but it would be for a city with a population of more than 50,000, with expenditures between 5,000 and less than 50,000. 40% of qualified expenditures would be for those structures in a city with a population of more than 50,000, also with expenditures of 50,000 or more. There was a provision for 40% of qualified expenditures for structures in a city with a population of 50,000 or less. And then the last provision was related to historic structures that were exempt from federal income tax pursuant to Section 501c3. That percentage would increase from 30% to 40%.
Any discussion? Yes, Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hate to even mention this, but I've got an amendment, and it's a small one, very small.
Could you pass it out and we will take a look at it?
I said small, not simple, yeah. Would you want to describe it? It is pretty simple, but go ahead.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this amendment would amend on page 1. It would amend subsection A3 in line 30 to add, in addition to a city with a population of 50,000 or less, it would include also township or unincorporated area. And then if you turn to page 3, there would also be a provision added to clarify that the amendments made by this act related to the tax credits would apply to qualified rehabilitation plans placed into service on or after July 1 of 2025.
May I make a couple of statements? So we really felt that maybe that tax credit provided for classification of cities by population, by adding the unincorporated areas and townships, it probably would have already been included in the lowest population rate, but we just wanted to make sure that that language was added so that no areas of the state are excluded. And secondly, we also changed the date on the enactment and of these tax credits, just because we wanted to make sure that it's placed into service on or after July 1, 2025, because there's, we just wanted to clarify that and make sure that everybody was well aware of that. And also I just want to call your attention to the section above that, line 34, that's not an amendment, but there were some questions about how is this going to be monitored, and we wanted to make sure that the executive director of the State Historical Society adopts those rules and regulations. They have pretty strict standards to make sure that these renovations are followed pursuant to all of the provisions. So hopefully that answers some of the questions that came up earlier, especially in relation to rural communities, rural, historical preservation projects being able to be focused on in this, and we don't want to forget anybody. It's not just for large urban or suburban areas.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any discussion on the amendment? Senator Owens.
My apologies. I was going to second the motion, but I don't believe it's been moved quite yet, so I'll hold off on discussion.
Yep. Any other discussion? Senator yes.
Mr. Chair, I just moved my amendment on Senate Bill 227.
Do we have a second? That's second by Senator Titus. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Back on the bill. Motion carries.
Say all opposed.
All opposed, excuse me. And motion passed. We're back on the bill. So any further discussion? Okay. Entertain motion to pass.
Mr. Chair, I move that we pass out Senate Bill 227 as amended favorably for passage.
Second on that? Second by Senator Corson. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on then to SCR 1606, and this is approving the creation of a port authority in Wyandotte County. Do we have a brief on that?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Concurrent Resolution 1606 is required by statute for the approval for a port authority sought to be established by the Unified Government of Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas. A port authority is an economic development district that cities or counties may create either individually or jointly. Establishment of a port authority provides economic development advantages to the city or county. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you. Would the revisers clarify, does this go to a vote of the people if implemented, and are these elected officials that are the governing body?
We're checking. We'll be right. So the question is, do we have, the question was, are they elected officials, one, and then number two, does it have to be this SCR go to a of the people? And so we're still checking that. Yes, Senator Clem?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. They are, they're not elected, from how I understand our Leavenworth Port Authority, and they are put in place by elected officials, though. So just, I think that we'll find that to be true.
Okay. Yes, Senator Owens?
Thank you. And maybe Senator Klepp has the answer to this. Does a port authority have taxing authority? And if they do, does that have to go to a vote of the people to be approved? Thank you.
We're waiting any other discussion? Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually had this bill last year, so fully aware of it, and that is my concern, is that it is a taxing authority, and they do not answer to the people. And it is a property taxing authority under, I think, it may just be sales tax, I don't know, but they are a taxing authority, and I don't know, we have over 4,400 taxing authorities in the state of Kansas. Seems like, why do we need one more?
The question that I think we have, it does, is whether or not it has to go to the people. That's the question that we're trying to establish. So while we're looking for that one, we're going to pass over this momentarily and go to SB 166. And who has a brief on 166? Yes.
May I make a suggestion? Since we are coming back Monday on the STAR bonds, would it be okay if we came back on the Port Authority Monday also?
I'll ask the committee, is there any opinion from the committee to pass over SCR 1606 for today? Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we need to spend, all of the authorities of the Port Authority are laid out in Chapter 12. I think if we would just have some time to read through that and be comfortable with what they can and can't do. We've already prescribed their authorities, but maybe if we were to refresh ourselves, it would be a relatively easy vote on Monday.
So we will, I think, with no objection, we'll pass over SCR 1606 until Monday, and we'll move on to SB 166.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 166 would enact the Fostering Competitive Career Opportunities Act to remove post-secondary degree requirements from state employment considerations. And recall that these provisions would not apply to the judicial branch, the legislative branch, or political appointees.
Comment, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment on this bill. It's relatively simple. When you see it gets passed out, what it does is strike sections 5 and 6 primarily. I think in hearing this, I support the intent of this bill, and I think it has some potential. But bringing in the Civil Service Board is not the appropriate entity to deal with any of these. And so I've eliminated the cause of action and got rid of the Civil Service Board piece here. I don't think we need to increase their duties. That's only if we don't need to make unclassified employees have an appeal to that. So I'd just like to remove that from the bill.
Any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none.
I would move my amendment.
Move an amendment. Do we have a second? Yes. Those have been made and seconded by Senator Dietrich. Any discussion? Yes, Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator, just out of curiosity, so in your mind, there would be no appeal process at all, or is this just the wrong body for that appeal process?
Both. It would be the result of this. And I'm not sure, my concern was the way this bill is structured, it's a little subjective about when it's not required, and setting up that whole rigmarole of appeal on it because you didn't write a job application correctly didn't seem to be an efficient use of state resources. I think my hope is the goal is to get more applicants through the door and not have them weeded out at the application process. And then hopefully, just by making that more available, we'll sort of meet the intents of this bill.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Seeing none? Like to move your amendment? We have a second on the amendment? We did? Move your amendment. No further discussion.
Okay, I close.
Close. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Back on the bill, 166.
Is that right? Thank you, thank you. So I'm a little concerned, I understand the purpose, but I feel like we're becoming the HR department for state employees. When the legislature gets involved in how jobs are being posted, what the job requirements are, I just don't feel that's necessarily our job. And so, love the amendment. I'm not going to vote for the bill just because I think we're just out of our lane. And I really don't want to have to look at this every year as people come to us because they didn't get hired for a job, because they didn't have a degree that they thought, it's just, when you hire someone, I've had over 1,000 employees in, my district, my school district, it's a very subjective situation. And so I just feel like we are opening the door for these agencies and others to be, upset, feel they've been, and remember, I'm also the chair of claims against the state. We see people in droves who have a grievance against the state. Excuse me. So I just think there's some unintended consequences here that maybe this bill isn't the best place for us to open that door to let more people apply to be able to fill these positions. So I'm hesitant, so I'm just going to be a no. Thank you. That sounds grumpy, and I don't mean to be grumpy. No, okay.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the senator's comments, but with legislative post-audit this year, we did some research, and it seems like some of the agencies aren't as diligent in their hiring practices as they should be. So I'm not saying whether this bill is the avenue or not. I'm just saying don't rule out looking at possibilities for how people are hired in the future and stuff, because we did have some negligence in one of our departments, and it has caused major problems. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? Yes, Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of look at this, it's different but similar in the way where we talk about banning the box on initial applications when it comes to a criminal history. Instead of putting that on there, we're not saying that can't be part of the decision process. It just helps people get their kind of foot in the door, that first initial interaction. And I see this kind of in that same way. How can we encourage more applicants? We know that even as a body, we're kind of trending away from that mandate of a college education at this point. And so I think that really this could be beneficial, and I think doing it on a state level as this proposes is a great test case for that. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm almost wondering, kind of based off the past two speakers, both of whom I thought made really excellent points. If this isn't something that we could maybe set up an interim committee or something to do a deeper dive on, because we did just have kind of one relatively short hearing, and I'm not that being critical of that, that's just the nature of our process here, but I'm wondering if we could almost set something up where we could just get a better understanding of what our current hiring looks like across state government, how it would be impacted by this, what other states are doing along this vein, because I know that this is something that is kind of a national trend that other states are looking at, but I'd be curious exactly how they implemented it. So I'm almost wondering, to me, I mean, I tend to be a no, but not because I think the idea is not without merit, just because I'm thinking maybe if we had an interim, we could better study and maybe fine tune this a little bit. I also kind of what Senator Dietrich said, I do worry a little bit about increased litigation risk where now every person who doesn't get hired for a position is now going to be able to maybe say, well, if somebody got hired and they had a college degree, that must have been why, and I now have a legal claim for employment discrimination that the state's now going to have to defend, whether or not it's meritorious or not. That's just a lot of resources. So I would be, if others are open to that idea, kind of looking at this more closely and maybe coming back next year with a better proposal. Because again, I know this is something nationwide that's being looked at. So the idea itself is, I think, very meritorious. I just want to make sure that we implement it in the most precise and effective way for what Kansas needs. Thank you.
Any other comments? Appreciate the comments on that. I think we would like to have the, yes,
I like that suggestion. I'm not opposed. I just see unintended consequences. So
we do have a amendment on the floor. Do we have, yes? Yes. Yes, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate the comments from Senator Dietrich and Corson. I think anytime we're reducing barriers to entry of things, I think that's a good thing. And I also think the Board of Regents has weighed in on this, which we should consider content experts, and they do like this. They do feel this would be a good movement on this bill. So I would say I feel we should move this bill forward, would be my suggestion.
We do have an amendment on the bill. It has been approved. I would entertain a motion on the bill.
I move we move forward with the bill with as amended.
As amended. We have a second. We have a second. That's Senator Owens. All in favor? Any discussion, excuse me, before we get started? Senator,
Just want to clarify, that was a motion to pass out of committee?
motion to pass out.
Okay, thank you.
As amended. Any other discussion? All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So that bill is passed out. So Monday, we will be taking up two bills. One will be 197, and the other is SCR 1606. 1606 on Monday, and that will be at 1:30 in our normal room. So 1:30 in our normal room. Is there any other business we need to take care of today? I would like to ask revisers and research to maybe be prepared to give us the summary of the changes on the Star Bonds amendment with each one of these, maybe have a little comment on each one of those, and yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also made a request to the Department of Commerce for some visitor data that has not been delivered yet. If you could follow up with them to see if that'll be available. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other business? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for being here today.